Hi, I'm Nicholas Seminario, founder of Dark Angel Company. This podcast is to share the untold stories of just a few of the many people battling mental illnesses in this world. If you're in need of a little inspiration to keep fighting or to feel less alone in your battle, keep listening and share to spread awareness. This is the Dark Angel Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Dark Angel Podcast. Today we are with Nicolette. I'm actually really excited to do this with you. Me and Nicolette went to middle school together, and I had no idea any of this stuff was going on. And that's something I really find important because I was going through something in 8th grade that was super tough, and you probably had no idea, right? It's like all these things that we go through and that are going on in our lives, people have no idea, right? People have no idea what's really going on behind these closed doors. So, Nicolette, I want you to introduce yourself, give us a little background, and then we're going to get into your life.
Okay. Well, I'm Nicolette. I'm 20 years old right now. I'm a student at Binghamton, where I transferred last semester. And basically, I've been through a lot, like Nick said. When I was younger, I struggled a lot because my mom was a single mother, and my dad wasn't really around that much, so it was tricky not having my dad around. I remember when I was younger, he would come and he would take my sister and my brother out on the boat, and he wouldn't take me, and that was something that always really stuck with me, and I didn't realize until around a year ago, my mom told me that I didn't know who my dad was until I was like 3 or 4. I would always... When he would come and pick up my sister and brother, I would say, like, when's my dad coming to pick me up? So, yeah, it was kind of tricky not having him around. He was, like, around, but not really around. He would pop in and out whenever he felt like it. So that was kind of where I started this whole mental health journey. I had that whole... And I didn't really realize that I didn't have a dad. Like, I didn't realize that it affected me that much. And then when I got to elementary school, I would see... Like on field day, I think it was field day, all the kids would have all their family visiting them, and I never had anybody watch me at field day because my mom was always working and I didn't really have my dad around. So I would see, there were even sometimes, I remember like explicitly, this one girl, her dad gave her a hug, and I like recoiled a bit. I was like, I wanted to like step in and help. I was like, are you okay right now? But then I was just like, oh, that's just her dad giving her a hug. Like that's a normal thing.
Okay.
So
what, obviously that's a young age to be understanding that stuff, right? So I'm going to assume, you could correct me if I'm wrong. You're someone who is emotionally intelligent, right? You're somebody who I guess would be able to understand these things a lot better than other people, I guess.
Yeah.
At that age, did you realize how hard it was not having a father figure in your life, and how did you deal with this? It's
tricky with me because, like I said, my dad was there. Like I called him dad. I saw him sometimes, but he wasn't like, he was there, but he wasn't there. It was like having a ghost around.
Okay.
So when I was growing up, I didn't really consider that I didn't have a dad because I felt like ungrateful or spoiled when like I had one who was kind of there, but he just like wasn't really. So I never really let myself think that I didn't really have a dad. And even recently, in my therapy lately, that's how I finally got to the point of acceptance. Like, okay, I don't have a dad and I don't have to feel guilty about saying that. Yeah, at that young age, I didn't really let myself feel it that much because, he was there. But it was tricky because he never took me out. He never saw me. And when he did, I was always super, super uncomfortable.
Okay.
And I never really felt... welcomed there.
Okay. And how did that make you feel at that age?
It felt pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, obviously as a kid, right, there's things we can understand at that young of an age. So, if you remember, what do you remember at that age? Like, what do you remember feeling? What do you remember experiencing?
I just, I know it's a horrible word, but it was just like despair. That's the one word that comes to my mind because I didn't have my dad and my mom was at work a lot. So I didn't really have anyone. And my siblings were very, very abusive physically and verbally. So when I would get abused, I wouldn't be able to run to my dad. I wouldn't really be able to run to my mom either because she was at home. And I had a babysitter who's like my family, and I have a tattoo for her, but
very cool.
But she was very old, so she couldn't really intervene much.
Okay.
So I was kind of like fighting it alone. And at that age, I didn't understand anything. I always felt like a victim. Like, why does this stuff happen to me? Why do I deserve this? And yes, people told me growing up all the time that I'm way too intelligent for my age and I'm an old soul.
Yeah.
So I always had that stuff too, like being so young and going through all that stuff and is one thing, but then being able to understand it all is another thing.
Yeah.
So it was pretty difficult.
Would you say someone like you had to grow up a lot sooner than you should have?
Yeah, I always say that I kind of raised myself.
Okay.
I did have to grow up a lot sooner than I should have. I kind of, no fault to my mom because I love her, but we didn't have any rules or any discipline. So I remember going to school and people would say like my mom took away my phone or I got grounded, and that has never happened to me before.
Really?
And people would say like, you're so lucky. And I'd say, I kind of wish I had some kind of discipline or some kind of guidance
for even
to tell me what to do.
See, like that's something that blows my mind. Even for you to be able to say that at that time is something that's very advanced. I feel, you know, like you said, everybody at that time's like, oh no, I don't want to get in trouble. I want to get away with everything. And for you to be able to see that and not be the opposite and take that and run with it, you know, that says a lot about you.
Thank you. If that's a good thing.
Definitely, it is. If you want to get into the next part of your life, you know, and kind of show us how this all affected you, how this affected your entire growing up, and, you know, and then eventually we're going to get to where you are today and how much you've healed and how much, you know, you've worked on yourself. And, you know, I give you credit and I'm really excited to get into that. So yeah, if you want to get into this next part of your life and really show everyone what you had to go through.
Yeah. So, growing up, my brother was an addict. I never really found out what exactly it was that he was addicted to. I was always too young to know, but he was an addict. And when I was in around 5th grade, he went to rehab. And that's something that you said I was very emotionally intelligent. That was kind of my awakening to that stuff because when I was growing up and my brother was in rehab, I had to walk around in school with this big secret that nobody knew. So I'd be walking to class or sitting in class or coming home, and I would just have in the back of my mind, like, nobody knows my brother's in rehab, and I have to, like, after school, I have to drive 2 hours to visit him, and I only communicate with him through letters, and
really,
I haven't seen him in forever, and nobody knows this, and it was like this big secret that I had to keep. So it kind of gave me that that next level or that depth that I never really had before, and then I started becoming conscious of everything. Because, you know, when you have a big secret, you just think automatically everyone's looking at you.
Yeah. Yep.
So then I started stressing about what I looked like. And then I started thinking, like, does my breath smell? Does my hair look okay? Is everything good? So my brother being in rehab kind of took me to that next level. And at that age, I shouldn't have been even close to that level because I was like 10 or 11. Yeah. I shouldn't have been worrying about that stuff or thinking about that stuff.
Definitely not.
That was pretty difficult. And I remember vividly, I wrote this huge letter to my mother and my stepmom when I was around 8. And it basically said, like, I know I'm only 8 years old, but I'm a lot older than everyone in this house. Even though I'm the youngest, I feel a lot older, and I should have the right to know all these things and be included because it is happening to me too. And a couple months ago, I found that letter, and I hadn't even remember I wrote it, but then it, like, all those memories came back. And
wow.
Yeah, so I was very self-aware at that age. And as I got to middle school, it only got worse. I just noticed everything. I became an observer, very introverted. I just looked at everything and I observed everything. I was kind of on the quiet side.
Mm-hmm. At that time, right? You obviously now, right? You just said you just found that letter that you wrote, right? Mm-hmm. So looking at that now, how does that make you feel, right? Seeing that you had to grow up so soon and see how you had to really understand these things at such a young age where you probably shouldn't have had to go through that, right?
Yeah.
How does that make you feel now? Does that make you angry? Does it make you upset? Like, what is your feeling behind that?
I get this weird sense of pride when I look back on those things, because I also have all the letters that I wrote my brother when he was in rehab. I have a box full of them and all the replies that he gave me. So I have all these mementos of my childhood, and every time I look back on them, I get very, very prideful and I'm very proud of myself and the girl that I used to be.
Good for you.
Because at the age I was just struggling to understand what I was going through and why, and I was even so young able to articulate it really well and develop and share my feelings in a really mature way. So at the time that I was going through them, it was just complete despair. But as I look back on them, I'm very proud of myself for how well I handled it all.
Good for you, and you should be.
Thank you.
Because that's not something easy to go through.
It took a long time to get to that point where I wouldn't take any of it back. For a long time, I would just sit in bed and be like, I wish I didn't go through any of this stuff.
Okay.
But it took a long time to get to that point where I wouldn't take any of it back.
Good for you. That's amazing, and it's something that obviously made you who you are today. Yeah. I also remember you were saying something about how when you were younger, your brother and your sister would tell you to kill yourself, and that's something you don't want to hear from a sibling. How did this make you feel? When did this happen, and how did this affect you?
Yeah, I was very, very abused. I don't even know how to articulate the depth of the abuse. It's very bad. I would get knives pulled on me. I would get chased and beat.
Really?
And yeah, I don't blame them. I mean, I'm very mad at them. I do have resentment towards them, but we were all very abused. It just kind of like it trickled down. My dad would abuse my brother, and then my brother would abuse my older sister, and then everyone abused me. It was kind of like a punching bag system.
Okay.
Yeah, they would tell me to kill myself a lot. That was one thing that stuck with me. They tell me to kill myself because I was the reason that the family was a mess and the reason that this was all happening. So I went through that. I do have a lot of CPS memories because I would go to school with bruises and stuff, and the school would call, or my brother would go to school with bruises and the school would call CPS. So we have a lot of that throughout the family, and it was very difficult for me as the youngest to not understand what was going on, but to still get all the backlash of it. And I recently found out my dad, when he stopped seeing us when I was 5 or 6, he tried to kidnap us because my mom wouldn't let him see us. So I found out that he would knock on our windows at night and sit outside the school for when school was over and try to pick us up and everything. And when one of us was sick at school, he would try to be the one to pick us up. So we had a very strained, very stressful, dysfunctional childhood, and it was not that fun.
Yeah, I mean, and see, I'm somebody who obviously went to school with you. This is stuff I never knew. I had zero clue, and I bet you many people had zero clue. You weren't somebody who was, sharing any of this stuff. This isn't stuff, I guess, that you really told people.
Yeah, I didn't really have anyone to tell. I didn't have any friends. I was very alone. I was always the biggest one in the grade. I hit puberty the fastest. I was taller, and I was also very fat at that age, very overweight. So I was very outcasted. Which
is terrible, and I always remember, I know we had science together 8th grade, right?
I think so.
Yeah. And, I always just remember you were just always such a nice person. There's something never, you never had anything mean to say, at least I felt that way. Mm-hmm. You were always kind, and, and that's why, it just goes to show you, you have no idea what's going on behind closed doors.
Yeah, that's something as I got older, I really advocated for. I have so many friends that are always seeing celebrities or seeing anyone, and they're either I wish I looked like her, or I wish I was her, or I don't want to be her at all. And I'm just even if they look like they're perfect, you have absolutely no idea what they're going through. I'm sure they want to be you half the time.
Yeah, exactly.
You just have absolutely no idea. So be happy with who you are and what you have, because nobody else has it better than you, and nobody has it worse. We all just go through it.
Yeah, and I love how you just have such a positive outlook on things. I think that yet again says a lot about who you are as a person.
Thank you.
These are things as a child where we shouldn't have to go through, right? These are things that we shouldn't especially have to go through alone, and you had to. You really had to. And for you to be able to sit here and be an advocate and be someone who's trying to help people now it's amazing.
Thank you.
Now, you said also you got bullied a lot in middle school and elementary school. Has that affected you still today? Is that something you still think about, or?
Yeah, most of the bullying was from my siblings.
Okay.
I turned into the bully when I got to school. It was very bad, but my sister and brother would call me pregnant lady and double chin lady, and those nicknames like stuck with me my whole life. I still think of them today. Because I was very overweight when I was younger. I turned to food because I didn't have control over anything that was going on in my environment.
Okay, so that was the only thing then you could control, right? It was the way you felt. You could take control over your life by, controlling your food and controlling, I know trauma is linked with control, right? It's something, trauma is something you can't control, right? So what you had to go through as a kid, you had zero control over that. So when you wanted to then control something, I guess your first thought was then food, and it was something that you could easily control. And, I guess that's why, one thing led to another. And then, that was the only aspect you were controlling.
I would get really bullied, get really abused at home. Then I would go to school and get like double and triple lunches. And it would be the one thing that like made me happy in my childhood. And then I would come home and I would just eat everything I saw, because then once mom and my sister and brother came home, then I had to just stay in my room or walk on eggshells. So I turned to food very heavily during my childhood and leaned on it, because I also, like I said, I became the bully in elementary school. I was very mean to my peers.
Really?
You always like think you're doing more than you are. So when I say I was mean, I was kind of just like sarcastic and an ass.
Yeah.
But in my head, that was like bullying. And I was like, that's why nobody likes you. That's why you have no friends, because you're just horrible and nobody wants to be around you. That's what I was thinking.
See, like, that's so interesting to me. So would you say also, like, your entire life, right, if you being home and I feel like, what, you could correct me if I'm wrong, you never had any positivity, I guess, going through you, right? You never had anybody trying to bring you up. You never had anyone trying to help you or, encourage you. And would you say that translated into, your earlier life? I know now it's very different. I know you have completely, like you said, turned that corner. But would you say that translated into your, your peer life and your school life?
Yeah. I mean, even now still, that whole not feeling loved in my whole childhood has deeply affected me now. And I'm still working on that. I'm in therapy, and my therapist says a lot. Exactly what I don't want to hear, which is exactly what I need to hear. But she'll always say, you're always looking for that feeling of unconditional love, where you're just loved for existing, and not where it's transactional, which is what I had my childhood, which is like, you give me something and then I'll show you love in return.
Yeah.
And I never had that feeling of just, I'm alive and that's enough. And that affected me very deeply. And same with my father. I would always get into relationships or get into friendships that were like reminiscent of my father and my brother. So it would be like my dad was around, but I had to fight my ass off for any kind of love or attention from him. So then I picked men and I picked friendships that made me have to do that same kind of work. And even now, right now, it's something that I still struggle with and something that I'm trying to like get a grip on. But yeah, the whole not having love and not feeling welcomed or wanted really, really took a toll on me. And that's probably one of the like biggest things that stuck with me throughout it. Yeah, that was hard.
That's, I mean, even me sitting here, like, you're almost leaving me speechless. Like, it's so strong of you to be able to, be able to talk about this stuff, first of all. That's not something easy to talk about, right? This is something that has obviously affected you and hurt you. Mm-hmm. And for you to be able to look at it and stare right in the face and say, no, I'm not going to let this control me. I'm not going to let this take over my life. That's super strong of you, and I, yet again, give you credit.
Thank you.
Now, I want to get into, in middle school, I know you said you also started developing anxiety, depression. How did you deal with this on top of dealing with all your issues at home?
I didn't.
Okay.
Simple answer. I got very angry. I was so angry from the ages of like 10 to 15. I started fighting back against my siblings. I started trying not to take it, but they were always bigger and stronger. So as I got older and I sought comfort in school, so I would never miss a day. I got into like this popular group of friends, so I would always be out with my friends. I would never be home. But the friends are also very toxic, and there was a lot of fighting and a lot of drama. So then the comfort place started turning into another place that I was scared of. So it started all internalizing, and I started getting very angry. And then I started self-harming as I got older. And this is like middle school age and like freshman and sophomore year of high school. I was very internalized because I never talk about my feelings much. I was always taught not to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm an open book and I'll tell you anything you ask me, but when it's like an intimate setting, I will not tell you anything. I'll just be sarcastic and joke about it. But yeah, I internalized a lot and started self-harming. And then when I got around the age of 16, I just could not go to school anymore. I couldn't go to school, and my mom and brother and sister were all at school, so home finally became a kind of safe place for me. So I'd stay there as long as I could. And there was this one morning where I just did not want to go to school. I hated it more than anything, and my mom wouldn't let me stay home. So I went into the bathroom and cut myself up pretty badly, and I was bleeding pretty badly, and my mom like had to take the door off the hinges, and then that's when I was hospitalized for 2 weeks.
Okay.
So that's how I handled it all.
So going back to the first time you self-harmed, what was your reasoning behind it? You know, what made you say, I want to do this? This is, you know.
I forgot about this until you said that sentence, but I had an internet friend. I'm sure we've all had one, but she was like my best friend and the only person I talked to, and she was telling me all this cool stuff about self-harm. And I was depressed and 13, so I was like, this is really fucking cool.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me how she burns herself, and I was like, I gotta try that. So I did. And I have this big burn scar on my arm, and I did it on FaceTime.
Really?
With her, and it was like the funnest. I know it's not a real word, but it was so much fun to hurt myself and to feel like this is the first type of pain that I can control and I can give myself.
So this is, you know, we're going to get into this too. So I know you said you just found out you have OCD.
Mm-hmm.
So was that a leg or an aspect of OCD? You know, this is another thing you're obsessing over, and then you gave in to the compulsion.
Yeah, that was, and I just want to clarify, when I say that it was fun, it is not fun. It was fun at the age when I had nothing else better to do. That's what I mean by when I thought it was fun. I look back on it now and I know it was not fun. Yeah. And it's a very serious thing that nobody should be doing.
Yes, definitely.
So don't take that the wrong way. But yeah, that was a big thing of control for me. Whenever anything would start to heal, I would go back and do it 3 times more just to make sure that I always had. It was like in my head, it was like if I cause harm to my body, then the harm happening around me won't be as much because I'll already have like my threshold of harm and pain met. So anything that happens around me will just dissolve. It won't mean anything. So I got very obsessive with that. Interesting. And always made sure there was something on my body.
And now would you also say this is something where, you know, you've felt something, right? You said, yeah. I know you've also said this is something that made you feel numb before all this. Mm-hmm. So in your head, was this something that would make you feel not numb?
Yeah, I struggled a lot with feeling. After a certain amount of time, I just stopped feeling everything and I started just getting really numb, and it helped me. I think it also made it worse because, like I said, I would have this like, you know, you see like those little thermometers where it's like the little ball at the bottom and then the red line that goes up. Yeah. I have like that visualization in my head whenever I would harm myself, it would fill up all the way to the top, and anytime anything would happen around me, there was no room for it, so it didn't exist in that thermometer that I had. So I got very numb and stopped feeling the world around me and stopped thinking about everything. And that kind of took me into my older years, like 16 through 20, where I started like the OCD and the PTSD.
Okay, and we're going to get into that. Before that, though, what would you tell someone going through the same thing, right? Somebody who is self-harming and doing these terrible acts to themselves. What would you say to these people?
I would say that I wouldn't say that it's okay, but I don't know what I want to say. It kind of sounds like a bad thing to say, but I would say that like you have to go through life how you're going to go through life, and this is your story and your path. So if you're self-harming, it's not good. It's not going to help you. It's going to hurt you, but that's your journey and that's part of your story. And if you are going through that, then take it a day at a time. And if it gets too bad, there should always be someone that knows, someone that you trust, someone that knows what you're going through, someone that will empathize with you and help you. I would say it's hard to go through it alone. And if you are going through it alone and there is no one that you can talk to, like me, I read a lot of books and I did a lot of imagining and a lot of crafting and a lot of hobbies. And I got really into coping mechanisms. And if you're also like me and didn't know about coping mechanisms and only just hurt yourself, you have the internet, which I don't like, but you can look up anything you want and find any answer that you want. And it's so easy to find something else to put your time into and to put your mind into. And I think that's a big thing that I went through, was not distraction, but channeling.
Okay, yeah, 100%. And yeah, seriously, if you guys are struggling with this stuff, you know, that isn't the answer. There's always other things to do, just like Nicolette just said. Put that energy into something else. You know, there's no reason to hurt yourself or do these things to yourself, because you are loved. You know, whether or not you have people in your life, you know, there is somebody out there who loves you. And, you know, and if not, which is, it's sad, and there are cases like that, there are people who are willing to help you, you know, and we're going to get into, like she said, with therapy, and there's always someone there willing to help. There's lines, there's phone numbers, there's emails. It's just so important to help yourself and not hurt yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. That's one things that I would take back, is hurting myself. I wish I would have found another way to go about it, because there's always just a different way that you could go and do it. I know it's fun when you're doing it and it's new and it's exciting, but it's not worth it.
Not at all, you know, and it's something that can really hurt you in the long run. And, you know, I keep seeing these things all over the place. I don't know if it's a sign or it's something I should be sharing with people, but it does get better eventually. It may not be next year, it may not be 10 years, it may take 30 years for it to get better, but it does get better, you know, and she's a perfect example of that. You know, I think you know, maybe that's why I've been seeing it everywhere, you know, because of this. You're a perfect example of that. I mean, what you had to go through as a kid, and, you know, how you translated that to now is beautiful. You know, it could have went the complete opposite way. You could have completely done the opposite, and it could have, you know, ruined your life, and it could have made you a completely different person. But instead of, you know, using it as a weakness, you use it as a strength. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, that's something that I hate. And I know that's a strong word, but it's something that I hate, is that people tell me that they don't think it'll ever get better. And I just want to smack them in the face, because I hate when people tell me like they're hopeless and they don't think that there's ever going to be a day that's better, because we all feel that every single day. Like we all have that feeling that all comes to us every once in a while, but there's so many people that don't know how to translate it and how to deal with it. And people like spend their lives looking to be happy. And something that like I just try to drill into people is that you cannot be happy. We have happy days and we have sad days. Like
100%.
Happiness is not a 100% all the time feeling. Like you have to start realizing that you're as happy as you're ever going to be until you understand that happiness is not forever. It's just a mood. Like we're happy sometimes, we're sad sometimes. And when we have those sad days, we can't just be like, oh, I'm never going to be happy, because you could be happy 5 minutes from now, but it might not last as long as the time you were sad. But then there's other times where you could be happier for days. And, you know, it's it's always going to be like every day is a new day. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 seconds from now. I don't know what I'm going to say in a minute. Like,
exactly.
I don't know any of this stuff, so I shouldn't sit here and tell myself that I already know how it's going to go, because I have no idea.
Yep, and you're 100% right, and I love that.
Yeah, that's why I was never, ever suicidal. I've been through so much, but I've never, like, really, really wanted to die. I never wanted to die because I always was so excited about the future, and what I've been through now, I always kind of take it like, I got it all out of the way now so that I could be happy then. And I never wanted to die for that reason, because I always knew that I'm going to have sad days in the future, but I'm always going to have happy days too.
That's amazing. And, you know, anybody listening, really take what she said into heart. You know, it's something that's so true, and it's important. You know, we're not going to be happy every day. We're not going to have the best day every day of our life, you know, and that's just the reality of things. So if we could take those bad days and try and make them a little bit better, you know, and look positively and know that there will be a better day in the future, do that. So now I want to get into how you started discovering how you had PTSD and OCD and how this affected your life.
Yeah, so after I was hospitalized, I mentioned briefly I was hospitalized for 2 weeks. They put me on a few medications that I did not like. One of them made me, after like it started to set in, it made me very risky and very careless. And I just didn't care. I would do whatever I wanted and not really care about the consequences. And I was still at that point where I couldn't stand a day of school. And this is like, it's a funny story now that I look back on it. And like, it was, everyone talked about it in school, and all the other schools in the district knew about it. It was a very big story, but in 10th grade, I just hated school and I didn't want to be there. So I went in the bathroom and I smoked some weed. And then I got really high. I let it set in for a bit. And then I excused myself and I went to guidance. And I sat in the guidance office. And my guidance counselor, who I won't name her, but she said, I just sat down and she's like, oh God. I started laughing, and you know, you're high, so you're just laughing. And I just was laughing for like 5 minutes, and she was like, Castelli, you need to leave. And I was like, I'm really high right now. And she's like, oh God, I wish you didn't say that. And then I was like, please suspend me. Please, please, please suspend me. And she said, Castelli, I'll give you 2 seconds to turn around and get out of my office and pretend this never happened. And I like crossed my arms and I sat there and I said, I'm not leaving until you suspend me. That's the only way I'm leaving this room, is if I'm going home. And we just sat there in silence for a good couple minutes, and she just let me really think about what I just said to her. She's like, I really want you to make sure about this, because I can make the call. Like, I can do this. If this is what you think you really need, I can do it for you. And I was begging, please get me out of here. So she called the principal, vice principal. You already know their names. You know who they are. Yep. It was very funny. It was very funny, especially knowing who they are. It was just, they walked in and they were just like, did this really just happen? Did you really just do this? And they know my brother and they know my sister, so they know our history. They know everything. So it was very funny for me. They were all very mad, but I was cracking up. It's also very high. But yeah, I got suspended for 4 months, got what I wanted. And it was beautiful.
And so the reasoning behind you wanting to get suspended was because you said you liked being at home now, right? This is somewhere you felt comfortable and you felt safe. So that was the reason why? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, when I got older, a couple months ago in therapy, I told my therapist about that whole ordeal. And I was expecting her to like laugh or make a joke, but she said something that opened my eyes so... It was so crazy to hear her say that. She was like, that is one of the most intelligent things I've ever heard. And I was like, what? And she said, you did what you needed to do to survive, because school was killing you and you were not surviving at school, and you did not know how to not go to school for months and get away with it. And a couple months prior to me getting suspended, my friend got suspended for the same reason. So I had that I could do this and get what I want. Yeah. And she said, you did what you need to do to survive. And that hit me on such a deep level where I finally stopped looking at it as a joke, and also was proud of myself for it too. Yeah. And I know it's not a good thing. I shouldn't be proud of that, but, of course, but I did what I needed to do. Yeah, exactly. You know, exactly. Like you said, it's not like what you did was great, but the idea behind it of, it's that fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to fight and survive, and you did what you had to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, looking back at that, would you say, don't do that? Would you change that? Is that something you would change, or?
I'm such a bad influence. I would say I'll turn into something positive. If you have no other options, there's always something that you can do to change your situation. I had no options. I had absolutely nothing. This was my absolute last resort to get myself some peace. And if I would have stopped looking for an option, if I would have given up and I would have not done what I did, I probably would have been way worse off than I am right now, because I would have had to go through those 4 months, and I don't know what could have happened in those 4 months, but it wouldn't have been good. And I wouldn't say I would do what I did, but just if you don't give up, there's always something that you can do to change your situation.
Which I think you're 100% right. I think it is about you not giving up, and that's exactly what you did.
Yeah.
Now, what was the reasoning why you didn't want to be in school? Because I know you said earlier this was where you were happy. This is where you felt comfortable. This is where, you sought peace. So what changed that?
It's really about my friend group at that time. I got kicked out of the friend group because 2 of my really close friends at the time were getting really bullied by the friend group and like ostracized and outcast, and they were not having a good time. And there was just this one time where they were all just verbally like spitting these really mean things at the girls for like 20 minutes. And I literally, stand up for people. I literally stood up out of my seat and I was like, can you guys shut the fuck up? Can you stop? Like, you are hurting them. Do you see they're like on the verge of tears? And then we all got kicked out of the friend group, all 3 of us, me and the 2 girls.
Okay.
And I mean, these were my only friends, so I was in despair. I was dying. My mental health took a really big hit at that point, because this was like my chosen family that I hung out every day with and lived with, basically. Like, we were all family, brothers and sisters. We all loved each other, and we kind of started to fall apart in high school.
Okay.
So my mental health took a huge hit because I had all these classes with them, and my whole life was built around them. So I would go to class and
since middle school.
Yeah, since like the beginning of middle school. So I would go to class and sit by myself and like shake and cry, and because I couldn't talk to the 20 of my friends that were sitting in that class. So then I started to hate school, and I started to not go, and I started to not go out, and then I was at home all the time.
Okay. So that's where it came from. So yeah, exactly. Like you said, you did what you felt was necessary to survive, and fight.
It was like, this was my chosen family. I had a family that I grew up with that I didn't feel like they wanted me, and this was the family that wanted me. And then when they stopped wanting me, it was like horrific, because then I got into that mindset where I was like, I'm never going to be happy. Nothing's ever going to go right for me. I could have happiness, but then it'll just be taken away, because everything gets taken away. And I spiraled so hard.
Okay. And now, was this when you decided to go to therapy, or was this at a different time?
I was in therapy since I was 3.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because we had family sessions growing up.
Okay. So was you telling them, the therapist, or even opening up to anyone, was this difficult saying you were abused? Was this difficult saying, all these things? I don't think, personally, it's something easy to talk about. How did you open up to therapy, and how were you completely honest?
I think growing up, it was, I struggle in therapy to get to the serious stuff. I've had, I think, like 7 or 8 therapists my whole life. And every time, if I really like the therapist, at some point they'll always be like, are you going to get to what's really going on?
Yeah.
And that always hurts, because I'm trying, like, I always think that I'm like saying so much, and that I'm like, I'll end the call, or I'll end the session, or end the Zoom, and I'll just like take a deep breath and be like, oh my God, that was a lot. And then they'll think I barely even scratched the surface. So it gets hard to really get to the serious stuff of what's going on. Like, I could say easily what I've went through, but saying how it affected me and who it made me is where I get really quiet and where I struggle to talk about it.
And do you think that's because it's something obviously that brings back memories and it brings back, how you were?
Yeah, that too. Also, when I was very open as a child. I didn't have these problems when I was little. I would talk about all these feelings, and my family or friends would always say it was for attention, and never really take it seriously. So I stopped and didn't talk about how any of it made me feel. I don't know if it was out of fear, because it was kind of like, if I talk about this, which is really hard to talk about, and I don't get the outcome that I want or the response that I need, then it would feel like I went through all that struggle to talk about it for a waste. So I just stopped.
Yeah. Okay. And that makes complete sense. It's not something, that's easy to share, right? So when you are sharing it, you want a positive response. You don't want somebody, like you said, saying it's invalidated or it's not legit, and who are they to say that, really?
Yeah, exactly.
But at a young age, it's like, you don't know that, right? How do you expect to say, if somebody says, stop, you're just trying to get attention, and then in your head, you're like, maybe I am, and then you start questioning yourself.
Yeah, I started to believe it. That was the worst part.
Yeah. And then as you get into an older age, it's like, how do you expect things to be different, right? That's all you know, right? And that's all you're going to expect to happen. So why would it happen differently now?
Yeah. And
then it translates into adulthood, and that's when it's hard. It's really, really hard.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to ask you that hard question. How does it make you feel, and what does it make you feel today? And really try and dive in. And the reason I'm asking you this is not because I want you to have to dig deep and answer this hard question. It's for those people at home who are going through something similar, who had to go through this hardship. And some people, it's hard to ask themselves this question, right? It's hard to reflect, and it's hard to understand why. But maybe you're going to be the reason why they understand, and you're going to be the reason why they can flip their outlook around as well.
Yeah, I finally got to that point where I could just admit the core feeling that all of this has brought me, and everything that I've been through, everything that I said and haven't said yet, has all just brought me to this one core feeling that I developed of feeling completely unlovable. And that's the one thing that I struggled so hard to admit to myself and to admit to myself. I just couldn't admit that to myself, because I always put on this persona of not caring what people think. Like, I get all these tattoos and I have all these piercings, and I do whatever I want. I dress how I want. I act how I want. And I have this image that I don't care. And admitting to myself that I do care, that I care so much that I developed OCD, was so hard for me. And anything, even to the present day, the tiniest thing goes wrong, like my pencil tip will break off, and I'll just have a meltdown of feeling completely like unlovable, like the universe doesn't even love me. I broke my pencil tip, like nobody loved me. And that is, I wish I could tell the people that are feeling the same thing how to deal with that feeling, but there are days now where I still like get that feeling and I don't know what to do with it or how to feel with it. But the days that I can deal with it, I have some of the best friends I've ever had in my life. I have these people that are my family that I'm moving into an apartment with today.
Which is amazing.
After this, I'm driving back to school to move into an apartment with my best friends in the world. So I have this love, I have this great love, and I have stepsisters and actual sister and my brother, who I went through it when I was little, but I would die for them now, and I love them all. And I have so much love that when I get into these moods, I'll literally take a mirror and I'll look at myself and I'll say, like, you have more love than you could ever ask for, and you're very lucky. So I know it feels like this right now, but it won't feel like this in an hour, and just remember that.
Good for you. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Seriously, that's something. And thank you so much for sharing that. That's really, really big of you. So thank you. And I really have a feeling that's going to help a lot of people, because it even changed my outlook on things. There's plenty of times where I'll go through things exactly just like that, where, maybe not to the same extreme or in that same light, but it's just that negative thinking, right?
Yeah.
And you're 100% right. You have to realize what we do have, not what we don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are some amazing words. Now, I want to kind of get into your PTSD, your OCD, and how that transitioned you into therapy now, and then more things of what you're doing to better this. And if you touched on those things, you felt like you touched on them already, great.
Okay.
But if you want to then get into these positive things now, what are you doing now, and what have you used to cope, and these habits that you've tried to incorporate?
Yeah, of course. I'll just like kind of do this a little bit quicker because it's a long story, but
get into it.
Okay.
You're good.
Do we
You're
have
good.
time?
We have plenty of time.
I smoked a lot of weed in middle school and high school, and it was like a coping mechanism. I used it to sleep. I used it to function. And then once I started getting really anxious and really depressed, I started to slip with the stability. I wasn't very stable. So there was this one time I smoked weed and I panicked harder than I've ever panicked in my entire life. And I know a lot of people have been through this and they keep smoking weed after, but it hit me so hard I will never even go near it again.
Really?
I smoked and then I started feeling like I was like getting dragged into the earth. Like it was weird. I felt like gravity was like pulling me down into the earth. And then I thought I died and I thought that I was like in hell, and I was dissociating pretty heavy.
Wow.
And I thought that I was like living the same moment on loop. And my friend was with me and she said that I was like a stone. I wasn't moving. I wasn't blinking. But in my head, I like had like this film playing of like my entire life start to finish and everything that I was going through. And I was like, so much was going on in my mind, but my body was 100% still. And she said that the only thing that I said that whole time was like, I think I'm having a heart attack and I think I'm dead. And this was like 3 hours of me being frozen solid and thinking, because I couldn't, like I was like paralyzed, so I couldn't move. And so I thought I was stuck like this forever. And it took me like 3 hours to finally move. But that was traumatizing. That was horrible.
Yeah, that sounds very, very scary.
Yeah. And then I thought I was built different. I was like, I'm built different. I can do this. So I smoked 5 more times after that because I loved weed and I didn't want to stop it. I didn't want to lose that. So I did it 5 more times thinking that I could force myself to not bug out. But then I did all 5 times.
Wow.
One of the times I fell asleep because I didn't know what else to do. And I thought it'll go away once I sleep. But it carried on into my sleep. So instead of being awake and being able to move, and like I figured out how to move while it was happening, but I was asleep. So I was literally paralyzed. But it was going on in my head while I was asleep. So it was like the nastiest lucid dream ever. And then another time, I was in the car with my friends and my one friend got everybody else out of the car. And I was like, bro, just slap the shit out of me until I stop freaking out. So he slapped me in the face 12 times. I had bruises on my face.
Oh my God.
Until I snapped out of it. Because like, you don't think it's that serious.
Yeah.
When I tell you it, but I thought I was dead. I literally like thought I died all 5 times.
So would you say this is kind of what awoke that PTSD from your childhood? Because this just kept replaying and replaying. That is how I found out I had PTSD. Because
after that, I didn't go out at all. I had some friends again. I had a life. I had some stability. I didn't leave my house. I didn't go out. I wasn't around weed because I didn't go out. But the times that I did go out and I smelt it, my heart would start pounding. My head would get really cold like I was going to pass out. And then I started getting cotton mouth as if I had smoked. And then my throat started feeling really scratchy as if I just took a hit. And I got all these pseudo symptoms of smoking and being high. And I've never experienced that in my life. And that I realized as I started doing research is a direct symptom of PTSD. Like you hear people go to war and they hear like a pot clang in their thing and they're like having all these flashbacks. And that's what happened to me. And as I got older, I think around like 17, that happened when I was 16. And when I got like 17 or 18, my psychiatrist said that I have severe PTSD, like crippling, debilitating PTSD.
Wow.
Because I didn't leave my house. I didn't go out. I couldn't smell it. I couldn't even say the word weed for a very long time.
Really?
And that's how I found out I had PTSD. And I was like, I understand that I have PTSD and I can't be around weed, but why? Why did that happen to me when I smoked?
Yeah.
And he's like, your childhood. You have not dealt with any of that stuff yet. You have all this stuff that's built up. And when you smoked, it took away that wall in your head and all of it poured in.
Oh, that's very interesting.
You couldn't handle it and you collapsed. And literally, it was so hard that you thought you died to have all that in your head. Wow. So that was very eye-opening for me to realize that I had PTSD. And to this day, if I get yelled at, if anybody raises their voice, I shrink. I feel like I'm shrinking. I hide in this corner and I feel like I'm shaking like a scared puppy because getting yelled at, getting reprimanded, it throws me back and it freaks me out and it terrifies me.
Wow. That's so. Now I'm going to ask you another question. What would you say to someone who's going through that same thing but doesn't know? Maybe it's not through weed, maybe it's not through alcohol, whatever it's through, how did you get comfortable enough to open up to your psychiatrist, and how were you able to say, look, I was abused as a kid, I had to go through all this stuff, right? Like I said, that's not easy stuff to talk about. Is it something you've been talking about so much that it became easier? What was that like?
Yeah, as I said before, I'm used to talking about all my trauma because it's something that I'm very, very into mental health and advocacy. So it's something that I talk about a lot, but I never talk about how it makes me feel. I always talk about it. I'll just say what happened and I won't say anything else. So getting to that point where I was so desperate to not feel that way that I finally just opened the floodgates. It was very difficult. And I would say to people who are feeling that way, to take your time and to not rush it, because I'm not going to say to sit with that misery, but if you are sitting with that misery and you don't know how to open up about it, it's okay. You'll get to that point one day where you are able to. I always say, years ago, I learned the definition of motivation is when the pain of not doing something is worse than the pain of doing it. And that's how I lost 40 pounds. I saw that one video and I lost 50 pounds.
Wow. When
I was overweight. But it's something you're not going to be able to do it until you get to that point where you can't not do it anymore. And it's hard for me to sit here and say, just deal with it. But don't force yourself, because it's going to make it so much worse if you force yourself before you're ready to talk about it and you're ready to open up about it.
That was my next question. Would you suggest someone, to kind of push to open up about it and go and talk to someone, not necessarily a friend. I'm saying like real help, like a therapist or something like that. Would you say obviously it's not easy, but at least put your foot in the door. Maybe don't open up right away, but get to the position of talking to someone. Is that something you would suggest?
Yes, and also a little bit no. I'll say it this way. I'm very gentle with myself, and it took me a long time to get to that point. I think about it this way. If you're a little kid, because think about, you have all this trauma and you didn't open up about it yet, so you're basically still a little kid because you haven't dealt with any of it yet. So if you're a little kid and you can't do your homework, or you got something that's really bothering you, you can't do your homework as a kid, that's hard. And your mom or your dad comes up to you and they're like, you got to do it. You just got to do it. Come on, get it done. They're not being very gentle with you. That'll make it a lot worse. But if they come up to you and they're like, is there something we can do to help you do your homework? Do you want us to sit and do these problems with you, or take a break and come back to it when you're ready? You're going to be a lot better off with your homework if they approach you that way. And I think about everything in metaphors, really. So when I think about opening up and getting help, I think to take it slow and take your time and don't rush it and don't force it, because being gentle is really life-changing when you have someone being gentle with you and not forcing you to do these things, because it makes it something you don't want to do it if you're being forced to do it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a lot harder to do it if you're being forced to. So when you hit that point that you're ready, take advantage of it. Don't sit there and not do anything with it, because you might be ready and you might just sit there with it until it fades away and you're not ready anymore.
Okay.
like jump on it when you're ready to.
All right. I like that. I like that a lot. Now, why do you think your OCD formed? So now we're going to get into OCD, and then after that, we're going to get into, where you're at today and what you've done.
Yeah, when I was dealing with the PTSD, I didn't open up about the weed for 4 years. So it was 2021 when I finally started talking about it. I got to a point where the motivation kicked in and the pain of dealing with the trauma was too hard and I needed to do something about it. So I finally opened up about it. And I did exposure therapy, which started off as like, imagine weed. And then a week later, imagine putting weed in a bong. And then a week later, imagine you're lighting that bong. And it just kept going until I actually, like, my friend gave me a little baggie that I would just sniff every once in a while. So it got to a point where I could be around it, I could talk about it, I could think about it. And that was how I got diagnosed with OCD, because I got very, very obsessive about dealing with the weed incident. I never know what to call it, the incident.
Yeah.
But I got very obsessive about it. I had alarms. Like, okay, at 2:00, I have to sniff it. At 4:00, I have to sniff it. And I would not miss a beat because I did not want to regress in any therapy. I didn't want to go backwards. I wanted to get better. So then I started developing. It was the first eye opener to my control issues.
Okay.
And then that's when that therapist at the time, I was using the therapist at my old school, so it was temporary, but he gave me this questionnaire to fill out, and they were all very interesting questions about control. And I filled them out, and he was like, the next session, he was like, so listen, you scored very high and you might have OCD. And I was like, how did you get to that conclusion? And he's like, well, I've been talking to you for months, and every time you say something, it's just so reminiscent of someone that might have OCD. The way you articulate and the way you compartmentalize, and I once described to him how I have like a bookshelf in my mind.
Okay. Where
like I need to think about something. So like in my mind, I'll go to this bookshelf and pull out the book that has all that information. And he said, just a lot of the things you say sound like OCD. And it doesn't sound like you've had that your whole life. It sounds like something very recent that has been developed. So that's how I found out I had trauma-induced OCD.
Okay, so you would say there's a direct relationship with your childhood and your OCD. What do you do now to help reduce, your OCD and these obsessions and these compulsions? What are you doing to aid these? I
started a business. I make a lot of jewelry and I sell it. When I was younger, my aunt taught me how, and that was my coping mechanism my whole life. So I started making and selling my jewelry, and it helped with the OCD because I could control everything that I did. I had the whole business in my hands. I made everything, I sold everything, I shipped everything, designed the whole website. I had all the control. And I also got to feel very loved because people would come to me and they would message me and they would pick me out of all the people in the world to create custom jewelry, something that they've always wanted and they can't find in the store, and they would pick me, and I would get reviews. And oh, by the way, thank you for showing me how to get reviews way back.
No problem.
But I finally started getting reviews, and they were these
awesome.
they were like these beautiful reviews. So many of them made me cry. I finally felt loved, and I finally felt in control.
And why don't you plug your business name? And so if anybody who's listening, they want to check it out, definitely support her. That would be awesome.
Thank you. It's called Nicolette's Bead Shop, and the website is just nicolettesbeadshop.com. But it's been a year now. I think it's going to be a year in February, and I have over like $8,000 in sales, $8,000 in sales. And this semester at Binghamton was very, very tricky, so I didn't do much jewelry, but I have big plans for next year.
Good for you.
And it was when I first started this business, it was so life-changing to be sitting at my desk for hours and hours making orders, because I went viral on TikTok. So I had orders like flooding in, and I started advertising that I do custom. So now that's where 90% of my sales are custom jewelry. So it was very life-changing. And then I finally started the therapy for my OCD, and realized that my mom, when I was younger, would always say, you're never happy and you're never satisfied. And that always hit me really deep. And I always hated when she said that, because in my head, rationally, I knew that I had everything I could ever ask for. I had a beautiful house. I had a lot. I still have a lot. And then the irrational part of my brain is always looking for more, always trying to get more, always trying to find a better way or a more controlling or a complete way to do things. Like, for example, when I moved into the bigger room in my house when I got older, and I needed a desk to do my jewelry, and I'm 19 years old at the time, and I'm like having like a freaking tantrum about the desk that I was getting because my aunt had one in her attic, and I just had this picture in my mind of like this old rusty desk. I had a picture of the desk. It was old and gross, but it was a perfectly fine desk. But I just imagined like opening the drawers, how they would get stuck, and I'd have to jiggle it open, and like the creaking sound, and I had a full-blown panic attack about a desk, and that was very eye-opening for me to see how deep my OCD ran.
Okay.
Because I so badly rationally wanted this desk and wanted to be grateful for this desk. But irrationally, I thought I would literally die if I had that desk in my room. Like, I would not touch it. I wouldn't go near it. It would feel contaminated and wrong. And so I bought a $200 new desk for myself because I just like couldn't go near it. It filled me with a feeling of dread to have that desk. And that is just a vague story for everything with OCD. Anything that doesn't feel right feels like it's going to kill you.
Interesting. And
it's
is
not
that
fun?
Is that with your specific trauma-induced OCD? Is it specific to that?
Yeah, it's how I manifested control.
Okay.
If things feel wrong or if things feel hurtful or harmful, I will not do them. I cannot do them. It hurts. It'll cause me like physical pain. My mom wanted me to back into the driveway, and I did not want to do that. I wanted to pull into the driveway. And sometimes it's not dread. Sometimes the annoyance triggers the OCD. So me thinking about taking the extra 10 seconds to back into the driveway, it sounded so annoying that I thought I was going to die from doing it every time. Until I could not do it. Like, I physically like couldn't let myself back into the driveway.
Interesting. So what are your goals for the future? What is something you are going to do day to day to help yourself? And what would you tell someone who's going through any of these things?
My goals are to pour myself into my coping more. I have my business. I crochet. I bookbind. I can play instruments. I have a lot of skills and hobbies, and I want to really take advantage of those more and start, when I get these obsessive moods, pour it into something that is good to be obsessed over, like making a really nice necklace. Mm-hmm. So I'm really trying to lean on these coping skills more and try to get a handle on the PTSD, the obsessive thoughts, whenever those come around, to try and deal with them in a healthy way and stop internalizing them. And I would say the same thing for everyone else, is to, when these things happen, when you get these moods, you really just find a hobby that you really like. If you're too young to move out or start a new life, hobbies are so important because they are like, especially books, like books are so good. They will take you to a whole nother world if you focus on them hard enough. Like, and if you really like the book, you don't even have to focus. You'll just be in this whole new world. And hobbies are very important. And also, if you have something that you feel like, I've tried everything and nothing is getting better, you could consider medication. It could be helpful in some cases. Sometimes it's worse. But if you are on medication, I just want to say, it doesn't do all the work. You have to work with the medication. You can't just take a pill and think it'll fix you. You have to take a pill and do the work. It's like, it's the tool, but you have to figure out how to use the tool. You know what I mean?
Exactly. 100%. And the last thing, what would you go back and tell yourself? You know, your younger self. You know, obviously you're somebody who has been through a lot. You've grown a lot. You've matured a lot. What would you go back and tell your younger self?
I would go back and give myself a hug and tell myself that I love you, and a lot of people do love you, and a lot of people are going to love you. You got, what, like 90 years of new people and old people, and that are all going to come and go and love you and hate you, and there's just so much love and so much happiness that you're going to be surrounded by, and I know that it's terrible right now, but next month it's not going to be that bad. Like, it's always going to find a way. There's always going to be a balance. It's always going to balance itself out. So it might be horrible right now, but when it gets good, it'll be really good.
Yep. And would you look at yourself now, and are you happy with who you've become? Are you proud of yourself?
Yeah, I'm very happy with myself. Like, sometimes I feel like I might be a little bit conceited because...
Hey, that's okay.
I'm really proud of how far I've come.
And you should be.
I've gotten to that point where I wouldn't take any of it back, and where I've become like too intelligent for my own good.
Good for you.
I'm really proud of how far I've come. Yeah, and it's been hard to get to that point where I love myself, but I really do. Good.
And you should. You really, really should. You have an absolutely amazing story. Is there anything else you would like to touch on?
I would just say, like, everyone says it and it's so hard to actually do it, but love yourself.
Yep.
And no matter how you get there, once you actually love yourself, even if you have some moments where you hate yourself, if your overall feeling is loving yourself, you're going to be so much better off.
Definitely.
You're going to know what you deserve and know what relationships you should be in and what friendships and how to treat your body. And when you actually care about yourself and you take the time to care about yourself, because you spend your time wishing someone would care about you, but you have to care about yourself first.
Yep.
It's going to be so much. Your worldview is going to completely change the second you actually like take the time to care about yourself the way you wish someone would do it for you.
Definitely. Thank you so much for coming on today. I can't wait to see how many people you're going to help and you're going to affect.
Thank
you. Before we close too, you could say your business again. I want people to support you.
Thank you.
Give it one more plug.
It's NicolettesBeadShop.com, and that's Nicolette's Bead Shop is like my handle for every social media platform. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for getting vulnerable. It's not easy what you had to share. So thank you guys. And
thank you.
Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you guys so much for listening, and don't forget to check out Dark Angel Company on Instagram at Dark Angel Co. and online at darkangelco.com. If you're interested in supporting and spreading awareness towards bringing light to a dark topic together, then tune in next time.